I was a pretty happy child. I mean, I loved to laugh and play and sing and dance, all those things kids do. But I personally don't have any memory of that at all. My memory starts at 7 years old, and it starts with when my stepfather Harold started raping me. And he continued doing so for another 4 years. So that's what childhood was to me, was pain and fear and feeling like nothing was ever going to be good. The first time that Harold raped me, it was at St. John's Catholic School, the school I attended. He was the janitor there. And one particular Saturday, I was with him down in his little office in the basement. And he handed me some money and he told me to go up the street and get a half a dozen donuts. And when I got there, I suddenly couldn't remember whether we wanted half a dozen or a dozen or what. So I got a dozen donuts. I went back down the hill. I brought him those donuts. I handed him the change. And he looked at the donuts, he looked at the change, and he just exploded. Total, absolute, horrifying anger, screaming, yelling, calling me every profane name in the book. Suddenly, everything shifted. And when it was over, my mind couldn't handle that it had happened. I just kept crying and crying and crying. And I've never forgotten that. I've never forgotten that, and I probably never will. The abuse went on for several more years, living with being raped almost every single day. It weirdly becomes routine, but it doesn't become a routine that you adjust to and you're all right. It becomes a routine that you always expect to be under threat. He had done such a good job shutting me down that I couldn't look anyone else in the eye. I felt like I was at the bottom of a black pit, and no matter how hard I looked, I couldn't see the top. That was my childhood. The trauma of being groomed, of childhood sexual abuse, trains victims, eventually survivors, not to speak up. When they do speak up in their family or their community and people shut them down, they learn to be shameful, to feel guilty about their own story and about the pain that they've been through. And that becomes and became for me a way of living. This kind of trauma, it doesn't magically go away. I'm 53 years old and I can still feel his filthy, sweaty, hairy fingers on my shoulders pushing me down into the toilet seat, and I can still taste him in my mouth choking me. I think a lot of people don't understand what somebody with PTSD goes through when you have a flashback. It's not just remembering something. It is putting you in the exact place you were when these events occurred. Sight, smell, sound, technicolor. It's like it's happening again. In many ways, our culture is not really equipped to deal with survivors and the issues surrounding that. I had a colonoscopy. I told them I was a survivor before I went under. I come out and I'm hazy, and the first thing they show me is a picture of my colon. I was anally raped by my stepfather. This is not what you want to do with me, okay? I was in therapy on and off throughout my 20s, my 30s, into my early 40s. And to me, in my mind, what the goal was to become healed. I would go through a couple years of therapy believing that was the goal, and then it would never happen. And I would say, well, this sucks, this isn't working. It really wasn't until I was in my 40s that my perspective on healing changed, and that's when I found that it was possible for me to heal. At one session, I said, you know what, I think I want to do a show about this, about my experience, because, it would probably help other people to see that there's healing is possible. Essentially, over the next few sessions, we developed a show together. I said earlier that was the first time I had sex. After I did the show in June, a friend of mine came up to me and she said, that's not the first time you had sex. You didn't have sex, you were raped. There's a difference. The majority of survivors out there are not capable of speaking up or speaking out. There's only a small number of us who can. Because they can't, I feel it's my responsibility to speak up and speak out to clear the path for them whenever I can.